Okay, looks like it's rolling up here to 1 o'clock. My clock is correct. About one more minute before we get started. Maybe my clock is slow, but we're getting there. Looks like we have a number of individuals on today. I think we're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple hundred folks. And looking forward to sharing the information with y'all. We've got some good rock stars that work for us here at Gridsmart that are going to impart all their wisdom and speak about our new GS3 processor. And first and foremost, want to thank Tasha for helping out with the presentation and the heavy lifting there. Thank you. So we'll get started in about 30 seconds or so. Bear with us a second. Okay, clicked over to 1 o'clock, so I guess we'll get started here. Welcome to the presentation, everybody. My name is Joe Lang, and I'm the account executive in ITS sales. My territory I cover is Kansas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Yeah, I know it's kind of a weird size, but we'll talk about that later. And I'll be moderating the webinar today. And with me today are three rock stars that we have here at Gridsmart. First and foremost, Tracy Nelson, who is the Director of Hardware Engineering. We also have Andrew Hall, who is the Senior Manager for Software Engineering. And then last but certainly not least is Young Rock Yoon, our Principal Computer Vision Engineer Lead. So with those three individuals, we'll be talking about the new GS3 processor and some of the things that we bring to the equation as Gridsmart. And so we'll jump right into it. If you guys have any questions at all, at the bottom of your webinar screen there, you've got a Q&A button. You can store your questions in there or pose your questions in there. I'll be monitoring that as we go through the presentation. And then we'll get those answered at the end of the presentation and go forward from there. So certainly let me know if there's something that you want to get answered and piques your interest. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about Gridsmart in general in these first few slides here and who we are. Some of you have some interest and know who the heck we are and have used our products. Some of you may be brand new to our industry or brand new to our product in general. But at Gridsmart, we recognize that managing congestion is only part of the equation here. We are much more and starting to focus a whole lot more on the road, and we have to think about what traffic shows us. And a thriving community that have people all over it want to travel around will produce more congestion inevitably. So we're here to make sure that no matter the circumstances, you get to your destination safely and efficiently. So we'll move on to the next slide there. And some of the use cases that we have in regards to Gridsmart in general, we've been addressing these issues since the original adoption of the legacy processor as well as the GS2 processor, but these kind of go to our core as to what we're trying to accomplish at Gridsmart. So first and foremost, we're looking at intersection throughput. We may need to skip a protected left or right turn based on what the congestion at that intersection is telling us or lack thereof. So looking at reducing congestion in that regard. But also more critical now is, for a couple of years there, we had COVID kind of putting people in a work from home attitude and position. And now we're starting to see those traffic volumes climb back up to the pre-COVID days, and congestion is becoming more of an issue. So we're here to we're here with the Gridsmart solution to be able to address that. You'll notice that our system is a unique intersection solution for not only just actuation and collecting data, but also situational awareness in that regard. So all of these buttons are going to address that. We're also very interested in cyclist protection or vulnerable road users in general. In certain instances, we may want to extend or shorten the green time depending on how that cyclist or that vulnerable road user gets through that intersection. So a slow cyclist with the Gridsmart solution and what we call our bike box being engaged. If you have a slow cyclist, much like the ones that I see out there on the road sometimes, we may want to get more green time for that cyclist to get through and get them through that intersection safely. But if you have a faster cyclist, such as myself, not to brag, you get maybe a shortened green time and be able to give some of that green time back to the cars and optimize that intersection a little better. We also, when we talk about vulnerable road users, we also don't want to ignore pedestrians. They're certainly vulnerable. And with our Gridsmart solution, we have the ability to do pedestrian detection. It's a hands-free way of activating pedestrian phases efficiently. And we can detect pedestrians and determine if ped cycle needs to run or if it can be skipped if there's nobody standing there needing to be served. Also, in that same manner, we can also, again, keep that vulnerable road user, that pedestrian safe. We may have to extend the crossing time for grandma or mother and father and three little ducklings getting across that intersection. So those are all things that we currently address with the Gridsmart solution, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. We also, as I mentioned earlier, it's imperative that we have situational awareness at the intersection. So in this manner, our Gridsmart dome camera allows us the ability to not only detect vehicles and pedestrians in that intersection, but we also have the ability of having a pan tilt zoom. It's a digital pan tilt zoom that we have in that intersection, and from that perspective, we're able to address even a live feed, so that other agencies or other parts of agencies can see what's going on in that particular intersection. And then we also talk about wrong way vehicle detection. It's a big safety thing for many freeways. We address that issue. And from that standpoint, we want to make sure that we look at and keep our people safe in our agency by detecting and sending information directly to the agency that needs to act upon those wrong way vehicles. Excuse me. We'll move on to the next slide where we talk a little bit, and it's already up here. We talk about the ability of having one camera with infinite views and being able to leverage that one camera to do multiple things, not only provide a live feed, but also provide detection capability. We talk about it also to be an easy install. Our solution is 75% less installation and maintenance time to get that camera up and running and get that intersection detecting. It's quick to learn and intuitive for the signal techs to be able to install. And then the data and metrics that it provides is the industry best data and APIs that we can provide. So I think you'll see as if you adopt the Gridsmart solution going forward, it speaks directly to our next city vision. It's a unique system for intersection actuation, again, as I mentioned earlier, and giving you the ability to not only collect data at that intersection, but also be situationally aware. So move on to the next slide there. And so when we talk about the Gridsmart solution in general, we talk about trying to do some problem solving. The GS2 processor was one of our earlier processors. Many of you may have some experience with it already. And so the GS3 has allowed us to evolve that processor a bit more for a couple of reasons. Let's say you've got a GS2 in place. It's still a viable solution out there. And the cameras don't change with the new GS3 processor. But what if we know that traffic is changing? We know that congestion is changing. What if you need a system with a bit more support or a bit more capability and computing power? What do you do? And hence we start looking at how the GS3 will evolve that capability. And then certainly traffic needs are becoming more complex than ever. More and more agencies are deploying flashing yellow arrows, and there's more pedestrians and there's more vulnerable road users out there. So what if your situational awareness has presented that your traffic needs are even more complex than they were when you had the GS2 initially, or maybe you're new again to the solution, and we require different feature sets to be applied there. Enter the GS3 processor from that perspective. And then certainly, how do you future-proof your system while maintaining the safety of your vulnerable road users? Again, the GS3 processor has had some evolutions in that regard, and we think that the new processor is going to take us now and into the future, helping you become a more effective agency as we go forward. So from that perspective, certainly data integration includes all types. It's a real-time video that we provide. We also provide the batch data to help you manage that intersection more closely. And we'll also be able to allow that data to be shared across third-party partnerships for opportunities for you to communicate with other agencies or even other departments within your agency that might have some need to take a look at that camera at that intersection, whether or not you allow that to the PD or other agencies within your municipality. So from that standpoint, the GS2 is evolving to the new GS3 processor, and we'll move on to the next slide here, talking a bit more about how the product has changed itself. You'll notice some things about it in regards to size and capabilities. And with that, we'll toss it over the fence to, I believe, Tracy, you're going to pick up from here.
I will. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Advance to the next slide. So we'll kind of cover a little bit, just a general overview of what the GS3 processor is like and looks like. It's really just an enhancement to what we had before. So we refer to it as the Gridsmart system. We've added it as a model number, just calling it a GS3. It's essentially the next generation of what we've been developing. It continues to offer, and as Joe mentioned, the same connections that we've had in the past to the same cameras and detection that you're used to using. As with the GS2, it continues to be shelf mounted. You can either put it horizontally or vertically. And we have a support for the rack mount version as well. One thing that you'll notice, I imagine even in the image here, is dimensionally it's quite similar to the GS2 with one exception, in that the GS2 was a 1U, where the GS3 here is a 2U, which obviously impacts the rack mount. The other thing that I'll mention is the GS2, I think you would agree, as you handle it, it felt and feels like a rugged device. The GS3, I would say, takes that up a notch. As you handle it, you can feel it. It truly has, as the Gridsmart saying was, true grit. The other thing I'll point out here as well, as we're talking about how it gets mounted, in the vertical position, a base is no longer required. We had a base available for the GS2 because it was a 1U and therefore tipsy, with the GS2 or GS3 rather being a 2U. There is no need for a base. In addition, you'll notice the yellow bands that you see around it, one in the front and one in the back. These are not just decoration. These actually are rubber that extend out past the unit and act as a rubber feet, so that the unit is stable. It doesn't slide around easily, and it offers it protection against vibration and bumping. As far as any other information you might need for it, feel free to reach out to the email link shown below, and the team there will be happy to send a data sheet on to you. We can move on to the next slide. So as we started development of the GS3, really the primary focus on it was to improve the compute capabilities of our processor. The GS2, I would say, is reaching roughly its 7th year of being produced. And as you can all imagine, over a 7-year period, technology changes a lot. And so there's more that we would like to be able to do. And there's new technologies out there that we want to be able to utilize and interface with. And so with that in mind, we've, as part of the GS3 development, we upgraded the processor that is going into it, which gives us more performance and efficiency. We also added into it an additional compute module that allows us to do more with artificial intelligence and machine learning, which in turn improves our ability to, one, detect, and two, provide meaningful feedback on what we're actually seeing with the camera itself. So as we look at the GS3, really one notable difference between it and the GS2 is there's really two different compute engines installed within the GS3, whereas the GS2 only had one. Next slide. As you can imagine, as we've increased the compute power inside of the unit, one of the things that occurs with that always is that higher compute produces higher heat. And as a result, a lot of work and study was put into how we dissipate the heat internally so that the unit is functional and cool in the environment that we place it. The outside of the unit looks like a heat sink. It's got fins on it. It's an aluminum housing, and that's exactly what it is. The outer housing acts as a heat sink for those compute modules that are inside, so that the heat is, a portion of the heat is funneled out of the inside of the unit to the outside, where it can dissipate into the open air. The downside of dwelling in the traffic cabinet, as you all know, is that there is no moving air inside of it. And as a result, there's a fan in the GS3, much as there was in the GS2, which pushes heat or pulls cooler air from outside of the unit and pushes the warmer air out of the inside of the unit. We did in this design make that fan field replaceable. So you can see here in the back, excuse me, we have 4 thumb screws that can be removed without a tool to remove a little back panel grate. Once that's pulled out, you just simply pull the fan out of the open space, unplug a clip connector, take a new fan, plug it back in, and everything goes back together the same way that it came out. In addition to that, right behind this black metal grate, we have installed a dust filter to help protect the inside of the unit from dust and debris. And as always, that would need to be cleaned periodically, just to make sure that it's not getting plugged up. But it is a standard off-the-shelf dust filter that can either be purchased from us, or if you want, it's an off-the-shelf item you can get on your own as well. Next slide. We look at the front of the device, kind of point out some of the features that are on it. One of the most noticeable things is we've added a front panel display to the GS3. It'll allow us to provide some real-time information to the user about the processor itself, how the processor is running, some of the things that the processor is seeing. And so with that in mind, there's only so much you can display on the screen at one time. It's a little hard to see in this image, but you'll notice to the left of the display there in the black panel, there's a little black button. That allows a user to advance through the different screens that are displaying. So one push of the button will advance to the next screen. It doesn't advance or turn off until you press the button again, and it'll advance forward. So it'll allow you to control what you see and when. And again, the intention is to be able to display useful information to the user. In addition to that, directly above the display, you'll note we still have the dedicated phase LEDs, quite similar to what we had on the GS2. And then I'll note that the call detections now show up on the display itself. Next slide. With regard to the camera ports, or we'll just call them PoE ports in this case, we have increased the number from what we had on the GS2. So as you're all aware, the GS2 could support 2 cameras directly without an ETA and Ethernet switch. With the GS3, we've increased that to 4 cameras, with the intention that it would allow a user to use 2 Bell cameras at a maximum, and then 2 advanced cameras in addition to that. So through that, we're supporting 125 watts, which allows for the 4 cameras indicated here. The other thing that we've done is we've added into the hardware some features that allow software to identify the cameras directly, each individual camera directly through each individual port. And because of that, it'll allows us to cycle the power directly for that specific camera in the event we need to reboot it without having to affect the status of any of the other cameras that have been installed. And then thirdly, with regard to the PoE ports, one of the things that we had noticed, and I'm sure a lot of you have, is that the most likely type of damage that we seem to get to the unit is when we have transient surges, either from lightning or some other potential damaging electric event or surge that comes in through the PoE ports. We'll continue to have the Ethernet protection module in front of these in order to help take that hit. But as always, there's only so much that those devices can do. They're meant to be sacrificial. But if those surges do get through, we have, I would say, substantially improved upon the sensitivity of our processor board to handle those events. Next slide. So then to cover a few of the more of the features here on the front as we look at it, we'll point out that we'll continue to support as individual modules the TS1, TS2, and ITS or ATC interfaces. You'll see in the image that we've got here, this is the TS1 module that's plugged in. As with the GS2, that's an individual item that you can order separately and configure it how you want. If you want to swap it out at some point and change to a different one, you just simply do that. There are 2 screws, not really noticeable here in the front, again, quite similar to the GS2, where this module pulls out and then plugs back in. I will note that it is not the same module used on the GS2. There were several reasons for that. One was a major improvement just to the sturdiness of that design. And so it is a unique module. All 3 of these are unique modules to the GS3, but the interfaces we support are still the same. The only changes that we really made to those interfaces, you'll notice on the TS1 module, that we do now support 32 inputs as opposed to 24 that we had on the GS2. So you'll see in the image here at the top of this TS1 module, the DB connector is now a DB37. And what that allows us to do is just simply bring more information into our system for recording and analysis. The other thing to point out, you'll notice the blue VGA style connector off to the right hand there. That is a peripheral connector that we intend to use for peripherals and sensors that we can implement and integrate into the future. So again, it's a way of trying to future-proofing the device to allow us more capabilities to expand upon the Gridsmart system and what we currently have today. In the back of the unit, not visible here, we did add in a power cable retention clip. The GS2 did not have that, but as these units kind of get moved around as people are working in cabinets, the power cable is the on-off switch for the product. So when that gets unplugged, the entire unit goes down. The cable retention clip will prevent that from occurring. So it physically ties the cable to the unit. So you can wiggle it around and nothing will actually come undone. And then the final thing, as we kind of look here at the front of the unit, worth noting, we do have the USB 3.0 port available as it was before to record information onto an external hard drive. And that actually, the way that acts will continue to remain the same as it did with the GS2. Next slide. And without further ado, I'll pass you off to Andrew, who will speak to the software improvements.
Thank you, Tracy. And I really want to take a minute to commend you and the rest of the hardware team for designing a really rugged, robust platform for the future of Gridsmart detection and the software that I'm going to talk about here. So next slide. The key things that I want to cover are really how similar the look and feel when interacting with a GS3 compared to a GS2 are going to be for those of you that are used to the Gridsmart solution. We are using the same exact Gridsmart desktop application and the same exact web application that you've already used today to configure your cameras, your detection zones, alerts and auto reports, administrating users, network settings, all of the above. So the look and feel, the interaction is going to be the same and should feel really at home implementing the GS3 in new or existing Gridsmart intersections. One thing I do want to point out here, you'll notice that there's a bit of a footnote and a superscript there next to web app. Historically, we've referred to that as the device manager. You'll start to notice that in our language and copy that we start to refer to that as the web app. We really see that as the future of Gridsmart and really want to focus on driving web integrations and web capabilities and slowly getting away from the thick desktop application that only runs on Windows. So you'll start to see us talk about that more and more in the coming months as we add new features and functionality. The hardware and software support, both of those support the same exact cameras that you already use with the GS2 today. Joe mentioned that a little bit earlier in the introductory slides, but you don't have to go out and replace any cameras at existing Gridsmart intersections. And we fully intend to continue to keep that the same. So as we release new software versions, new camera upgrades, anything that we bring out in the future, we want to continue to support for your existing intersections that have Gridsmart installed, so that you're not having to go swap cameras, pull new cable, and have to pull things through conduit, causing troubles at the intersection. I do want to point out that as that changes, though, and as we do integrate new hardware, new capabilities, the software does have to be modified to support that. So there will be times when we release new hardware, new sensors that do require specific versions of software, and we'll work very closely with our product management team and our marketing team, including Tasha and Ariel, to make sure that you guys are informed of those changes. We've misstepped a couple of times and wanted to really call attention to that we're going to do a better job in the future of communicating those. I want to point out that your network and laptop and cellular connections are all going to be consistent look and feel with the GS3 versus the GS2. It's going to allow you to integrate it into your same exact IT setups, whether that's an agency network, an external cell modem that you connect up at the cabinet. That's going to be fully supported the same way that we do today with the GS2. The GS3 is fully integrated with Gridsmart Cloud. Again, just like the GS2, you're going to see your heartbeats, site sync, data backups, and reporting capabilities from Gridsmart Cloud. And we want to continue to grow that capability. We really see the forefront of our solution being cloud, and you're going to start to see us introduce more and more features and functionality around that in the future, and we'll continue to support that on both the GS2 and the GS3 where possible. And by that, I mean on the GS2. We want to grow the GS3 and its capabilities. We really see the GS3 as the next generation solution, but it's going to work with all your existing workflows. So you don't have to go change your installation procedures, retrain anybody to understand how the GS3 works. It really should be a uniform transition from the GS2 to the GS3. Next slide. I want to take a step back a little bit to earlier this year with our 21.12 release. If you look at the changelog, you might think, well, that's a pretty light release. It didn't really introduce a whole lot of features or functionality. But the thing I want to point out is this was really a transitional release. And the thing that paved the ground, paved the foundation for us to release the GS3. A lot of hard work went into making sure that we could deploy the same exact software on a GS3 that we deploy today on a GS2. And most of that work happened in this 21.12 release. But I do want to highlight some of the features that we were able to include in this. And the biggest one was a new time window feature on our volume exceeded alert. And what this allows you to do is modify the volume exceeded alerts to only look at specific time windows. So say, for example, you wanted to look or you want to be notified when volume exceeds 100 vehicles in a 5-minute window. You can do that today. And we've got a little video here to show how easy this is to configure. So if we can go ahead and start that, I'll talk through it as we view it. As you're configuring alert, you're going to be the same way that you set it up today. You're going to select what time of day you want this alert to apply to. In this example, I'm using the morning hours of 7 to 10 a.m. I want to monitor to see if the maximum volume exceeds 100 vehicles over a 15-minute window. And what that means is that for any 15-minute period within that time of day range, if the volume exceeds 100 vehicles, you're going to get an alert. That way you can be more reactive to surges in volume. If you have a particular on-ramp or off-ramp that you want to be notified, if volume gets heavy over a 5-minute window, you can do that and be more responsive to scenarios out in your traffic network. And we're going to continue to grow features and functionality along that same way to be more, so that you can be more responsive to your traffic. With this release, we also improved tracking and detection algorithms when occlusions are present. So when you've got large, big rigs, semi-trucks, or even building shadows, we're going to have improved some detection and tracking in those scenarios. We also fixed a bug that prevented pedestrian detection zones from detecting pedestrians, their key purpose. So there were some scenarios where that wasn't working the way we wanted it to. We were able to fix that in this 21.12 release. For more details on what was included in this release, you can follow the link below to the 21.12 changelog on our support site. And as always, reach out if you have any questions. Next slide. But 22.1 is really what you're going to see with the GS3. This is the first version that we started shipping with the GS3, has all of the software support needed to be able to integrate the GS3 into, again, existing or new Gridsmart intersections, and is going to give you that same look and feel. So again, another release that probably looks like it didn't include a whole lot, but a lot of work went on behind the scenes to enable this and allow us to start delivering the GS3 to you so that you can integrate it and start deploying it in new intersections. Along with that, we were also able to enable pedestrian crosswalk zone support on single camera intersections. This was a request that we got from multiple people, many different agencies, where they want to deploy a Gridsmart system at maybe a mid-block and use that to detect pedestrians that are crossing and count them so that they can get pedestrian volumes at a mid-block application. We also have some smaller intersections that have plenty of coverage with a single camera. And so you don't need two bell cameras to be able to enable pedestrian counting, and we're enabling that as well. One thing that we do recommend is that you continue to adhere to existing recommendations as far as intersection design and layout. And if it's an intersection that really does require two cameras for good, accurate pedestrian detection, go ahead and deploy that second camera. The additional cost is worth the safety for your vulnerable road users. And if you have more, I almost skipped a bullet point there. One of the other things that we included is an improvement to our ATC and ITS cabinet support. For those of you that have been using Gridsmart for a while, you know we kind of messed up a little bit on the ITS module in that we were only supporting 11 detector inputs. The labels went up to 16, but we had our mapping off, and we've corrected that. So now you're going to get full 24 detector inputs on an ITS or an ATC installation, and that's across all 5 input SIUs. So addresses 9 through 13. You'll notice here, and I want to point it out, across the top, you see labeled 1 through 24. That's the actual detector number for that SIU. 6 through 29 indicates which detector input bit goes into the SDLC message. And there's differences across each manufacturer of cabinet. And if you have any questions about how this maps or what the appropriate way to configure it is, you can reach out to your regional FAE or our support team, and we're happy to walk you through a proper configuration and take feedback on the changes that we made to this UI. To see the rest of the changelog, again, visit our support site, where you'll be able to review all the change notes that were included in 22.1. And next slide. At this point, I will hand it over to Young-Rock Yoon, who will carry you through the what's coming with the GS3.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So I'd like to just present a bit of perks of this new processor. So next slide, please. So before we go, I'd like to just briefly recap what new features have been recently added. So we have added bike detection and bike counting capability to the vehicle zones, and we have added some new VRU vulnerable road user detection capability, mainly in the pedestrian and bike. So that actually enables us, as Joe alluded, that a touchless pad actuation, and also that enabled us to add a feature for activating crosswalk zones by detecting pedestrians and also counting pedestrians in crosswalk zones. And also we have added a new connector, looks like a blue BJ style connector to the GS3 that could work as a communication to peripherals that may be used in the future for extra capability, like if you want to add a new temperature sensor or some other environmental sensor, this new connector could be used for the conditions. And also there are some more new feature enhancements to the responsiveness of the how this processor used with this new display GUI on the front panel display that can actually provide some feedback when FAE is updating the new software on the processor, or that's going to actually add some more new additional diagnostic information displayed on the screen that can help FAE to figure out what's going on inside the processor. Also, some new features added to create a new menu action system that allows device administration functions to be run only on the display, and the advanced button, as Tracy presented, that black button next to the display. Next slide, please. So here I'd like to actually briefly present what is going to be added in the future to improve the detection. So as Tracy alluded, the new dual processing power expanded the computing power with a new processor, and that means we can use more advanced AI and machine learning deep neural network models to increase the accuracy of the detection that we're using. And that means using this new, more advanced detection capability, we can improve the detection accuracy for vehicles and pedestrians. And also this added computing power is going to enable us to use more higher resolution images that can actually lead to more accurate detection, particularly for the regions where previously we were having trouble with a low resolution, sort of like far away from the camera center. So with the new computing power, we can actually use a higher resolution for selectively for those regions to better detect like the vulnerable road users, such as bike, pedestrians, scooters, to enhance safety. And with the new internal sensors, now we have a better capability to do some predictive maintenance. For example, now we can measure the temperature inside the processor, so we can sense if the device is going to be superheated, and then we could actually reduce the load to prevent the system to before the system goes down. So we could use this new internal sensor information to more predictive maintenance. And so far, Gridsmart system has been mainly working as a detection system, but with the integration to a broader cubic eye test solutions now, with this new GS3 capability now, Gridsmart system is going to serve as a detection platform that serves as a part of more broader cubic eye test solutions, and can provide more detection service using its computer vision capability. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll hand it over back to Tracy for Gridsmart Processor reviews.
So with regard, kind of just a comparison chart of what we have between the GS2 and GS3. Again, some of the noticeable differences, and we've covered these. We had one system on module, which is a computer in essence in the GS2 versus the two that we have in the GS3. We've added in the front panel display to the GS3. The PoE detection ports have been bumped or doubled essentially. We've made the fan field replaceable. The other thing worth noting, we have the OS is changing. So previously we had been using Windows 8.1 in the GS2. The GS3 will be using a version of Linux, which allows us to use a more efficient operating system. Again, goes back to being able to get the most capabilities out of what we have today. And then, as Young Rock again mentioned, we have added that expansion or peripheral port, which will allow additional sensors to be plugged into the unit itself. I'll hand it back over to Joe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Young Rock. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate all your comments, and we've got a pile of questions piling up here. But before I get to that, I wanted to get to the next slide here. And certainly, as was mentioned in the presentation earlier, that if you have some need for documentation, just support in general, see the email down at the bottom of this slide, support@gridsmart.com, and we'll get you in touch with the right individuals to get your questions answered in that regard. As you can see, we are located throughout the world in many different offices, and we want to hook you up with somebody that can be in front of you and face to face. That's what we thrive on, and taking care of our customers and making sure we do it all right. So with that, I'm going to jump into some of the questions that the panelists can address. I've already answered a few, but got a few other questions to get answered here. And if it speaks to you, panelists, just speak up. I'll try and direct them to the right folks. So question here is, will the GS2 be phased out in the near future?
The answer is yes and no. Not of our own intention. It, as most of you would have experienced with COVID and the shutdowns, part shortages have gotten to the point where it's become impossible to build the GS2. So that is one reason why this transition is fairly abrupt. We'll continue to support the GS2 through warranty, but the GS2 will be and is being fully replaced by the GS3 going forward.
You bet. Next, will there be a 48-volt version of the GS3 processor?
Might have to expand upon the question that you're looking for. The unit itself runs off of AC power from 110 to 240. So it can operate on any AC power in the world. As far as running off of 48 volt, I assume meaning DC. We have a 48 volt conversion inside of the unit itself. So we supply 48 volt power out of the PoE ports, but the unit itself runs off of AC power.
Perfect. On the power plug, the power cable, is there a 90-degree version of this, or how does it exit the back of the processor?
The cable that we send with it exits directly out the back, so it will be no different than the GS2 with that regard. 90-degree cables with a 90-degree connector on them are not that uncommon. It's a standard computer connector. So that could be purchased separately, I would assume, but no, what we supply today will be the same exact power cord as the GS2.
So it comes out 180 degrees. Great. Are the drivers included to allow the single USB port to accept an extension for additional devices such as a monitor, a mouse, and a keyboard?
So on this one, as it stands today, we don't intend to expand beyond the single USB port support. The operating system is a server-based operating system. Doesn't have a desktop or any graphical user interface that you can log into and interact with. So there's no real need for a keyboard, monitor, and mouse support. We do have some updates in that arena coming soon, so stay tuned. But as it stands today, the intention is that we'll continue to only support the single USB port for recording data and images and other information to that USB drive.
Okay. What version of Ubuntu Ubuntu Linux is it running on? 20.04 LTS, 22.04 LTS, and how are OS updates going to be handled when they reach the end of life?
So this is a great question. Right now, it's actually designed around 18.04, which has security support through 2028. That said, we are constantly evaluating our operating system, security patches, and upgrades. Those will be included in our standard software releases. So the same updater you use to apply to your GS2s and manage Windows updates on that operating system, we'll deploy the same operating system updates, security patches, and critical vulnerability patches through our updates. And what that allows us to do is ensure that anything that we release from an operating system perspective doesn't interfere with our core function, which is to detect and actuate traffic at the intersection. That's not to say that we'll ignore security features and not implement them because it affects detection, but we want to make sure that the algorithms that we release and the software that we support works very well with those patches. So we release them in unison through the Gridsmart controlled software update.
Outstanding. Okay. Next one. This might speak to the little blue connector on the front of the unit. Any indicators or messages that the fan has failed?
I'll let you speak to that one, Andrew. I think
Sure.
it's probably important.
Yeah, it's a great question. And on the display, one of the screens that you can go to shows the active RPMs of the fan speed. And if that fan stops rotating, you'll see a readout of 0, or you'll also see that degrade over time. And to reiterate Youngrock's point earlier about the internal sensors, we haven't done it yet, but we do intend to build some internal diagnostics and analytics that are going to give you that predictive maintenance. So across the board, when we notice that something may be going wrong with that processor, we'll start to build in alerts and actionable information around those so that you don't have to go out and check to see if the fan has failed. You'll know for sure based on an alert or an alarm that you get from Gridsmart.
Okay, so in the coming rollouts, we'll get that message sent to us remotely. That's good to know. Okay, will the TS1 input-output cables have to be replaced when installing a GS3 at a GS2 intersection, or is there some adapter?
So again, sort of a yes and a no answer. Yes, the input cable would need to be replaced. The output cable does not. You can reuse what is there. We did look in depth at using an adapter cable, but frankly, it was more complicated than it was worth than to simply swap out the TS1 input cable. So we chose not to go down that route. So the answer is yes and no. Yes, the input cable would need to be swapped out. No to the output cable.
Okay, fantastic. Let me get to another one here. What is the size of the hard drive included in the GS3 processor?
The standard hard drive with the GS3-SYS is a 256 gig, and similar to the GS2, we will be offering a high capacity drive of 2 terabyte as a separate part number.
Okay. Will there be an ability to roll back software versions on the user end introduced in version 22.1 or in the future? This was not a feature in previous software versions.
If I hadn't already seen who asked this question, I probably could have guessed. Not yet. And in all likelihood, we won't probably do it in the way that has been requested in the past. And again, this comes back to the operating system updates that do get included with these updates. When we release an update and we apply a software update to the operating system, those are immensely difficult to roll back. So if we've applied a security patch or made some change to the operating system that may be incompatible with the previous software release, rolling that back would only cause issues. That's not to say that this is something we've entirely ruled out, but we have to be careful about the way we do it, the way we support it, how well it's documented, and the approaches to being able to do it out in the field, should this become a problem. We do take great care in making sure that our software updates are stable once they have passed all of QA, and when they go out to the field that they're going to be solid. And I do know that there's another question that came up in this that I do want to go ahead and address at the same time, related to software updates locking up systems out in the field. Most of these, based on our knowledge, has come from very much older systems out in the field that had other known issues prior to the software update. And this is an unfortunate side effect of our growth over time with Gridsmart, where we released GS2 processors that had bad operating system builds on it. We've improved that over time and hope to see those failures continue to reduce as we either repair or fix those problems with new releases and new operating systems. But if there are scenarios where it wasn't a known issue and something else happened that caused these software updates to fail, we work really hard to make sure that our QA process cover those and prevents that from happening in our software releases. So please do, when you run across these scenarios, do continue to open tickets. We monitor those closely, work with our support team to take that feedback and integrate it into our processes. It's not always perfect, but we do strive for excellence. And unfortunately, we know that there are some scenarios where that's failed in the past, and are just continually working to improve our software release process. Our QA team is hard at work at automating a lot of our tests so that we take human error out of the processes and make sure that we're releasing good, solid, stable updates for our customers.
Outstanding. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. Here's one for Young Rock. What is the accuracy percentage for the pedestrian and bicycle counting features? I imagine this is an evolving target, but Young Rock, can you take that question?
Yes, so a lot of different factors can affect the accuracy of the pedestrian bike counting. For example, like I alluded before, like distance to to the camera, how high the camera is, how wide the area is. Also, the weather conditions and lighting conditions. Like there are like a lot of cast shadows or some reflections from the road, and also crowdedness of the pedestrians, like how crowded in the scene, like there are like group of pedestrians or bikes moving toward together. So with some reasonable assumption, that reasonable amount of lighting and if the site is reasonably a good view with reasonable amount of traffic, it is showing pretty good accuracy. I believe it's less than 10% as of right now, but again, all these different factors can affect the accuracy. So like Joe, you mentioned that we're continuously trying to upgrade our system to improve the accuracy on those situations.
Outstanding. Thank you, Young Rock. That's good to know, and I'm excited to see those issues evolve as we go forward. Here's a question. Since the GS3 uses Linux instead of Windows, can one still access the GS3 via Windows and the web portal, or does one need to install Linux to access the GS3?
You can still continue to use Windows in the web portal the same way that you do today with the GS2. Our software continues to work and run on the Windows operating system. So when you run the Gridsmart desktop application to configure your cameras and intersections, you're still able to use that to connect to the GS3 the same way you always have with the GS2. So no need to change your workflow. We changed the internal operating system, but that doesn't affect the way you connect to it and configure it.
Right on. Okay. This one more of a comment than a question, but why did we label the port for the laptop port A and not just label it laptop?
That's a good question. I asked the same thing. No, initially we had planned to just call it the laptop port. It's obviously what we had on the GS2, so it would have been consistent. But frankly, it's not really a dedicated laptop port, and so it made more sense to treat it as an Ethernet port, which is exactly what it is. We call it port A. It can be used really for anything that a normal Ethernet port would be used for.
And I'll expand on that a little bit as well, Joe and Tracy. We do and have brainstormed some additional use cases, to Tracy's point, that aren't just as a laptop port. So we didn't want to paint ourselves into a corner and cause confusion in the future when we add alternate use cases for that, with it being labeled a laptop port versus just a generic A port.
Okay. All right. Can you put 2 fisheye cameras and 4 advanced on the system using an ETA?
You cannot, and the reason for that again is the limitation of how much wattage output we can allow on those ports. So there comes a point where you have to determine how much power your power supply can support. And so we had to set that limit somewhere. We set that limit to, again, the 2 bells or 2 advanced. Technically, you could do one bell and then add more advanced cameras to it than the 3 options that are there. So you could use an ETA in that case to get you more advanced, again, within the 125 watt limit. But as for being able to do 2 bell and 4 advanced, you cannot without having external power coming from somewhere else, which brings its own complications.
Okay. And the next one I have is for Young Rock. Is there any improvement on detection with regards to shadows, vehicle headlights, and glare causing faults detection or not detecting?
Yes. So as I said, we're continuously upgrading our detection system to improve the accuracy. Also, as a matter of fact, we have some improvement for the shadows and headlight flashes during the night already in the queue to be released later this year. And again, with its new capability of GS3, we should be able to use more advanced machine learning algorithms to improve the accuracy. So in the future, all these, the difficulties you mentioned should be able to be improved. And we're already working on more advanced AI and machine learning algorithms.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see. Can the GS3 be interfaced with the ATMS or with any ATMS?
I'll address this one briefly. So our ATMS team has done some work on integrating with the GS3 and as well as the GS2. So really any Gridsmart system. I will have to check with them on their roadmap and plans to release expanded functionality there. But I will say that we are working closely with them on some future work that isn't directly related to ATMS, but I think will delight some customers in the future.
Outstanding, outstanding. So a couple things that I kind of answered while you guys were presenting, et cetera, and maybe the rest of the audience wants to hear it. Certainly the fan is larger on the GS3, as you can see by the pictures in the presentation. It goes from side to side, and the fan almost looks twice the size of the original GS2 fan. The LEDs on the front of the GS3, I think we covered that in the presentation, but Tracy, maybe reiterate that.
So again, the LEDs on the front are the phase LEDs. So they give the indication of what the status is of the lights that are connected to them. So red, yellow, green.
Right. Okay. Other than that, I tell you what I'm going to do. If anybody on this presentation didn't get their question answered, I'm going to give you my email address and you can email me directly and we'll get your question answered. My email is Joseph, JOSEPH .lang, LANGE @cubic.com. And I'll make sure your answers get turned around in a quick manner and a quick time frame. And if it's a pricing question or if it's an availability question, we'll make sure the correct salesperson gets in touch with you either today or tomorrow. And we'll get your answers taken care of right away. Okay. With that, I don't show any more questions on here. Let's see, one last one. Is there any use for this device just on a roadway segment to collect traffic data? Would you need an external app database in order to collect and store the traffic data? Interested in traffic data collection, monitoring, and not intersection control, can provide contact information if need be. So, Mr. Blankenship, I'm going to send you a quick note here on contacting me. And we will get your question answered for the short term. Yes, we can do your data collection on your roadway and collect your traffic data. I'm just texting you my contact information. And if you'll email me, then we'll make sure you get your question answered in some more detail. Outside of that, I think we got all the questions answered. Again, you've got my email address of joseph.lang@cubic.com. Be happy to answer them and get you in touch with the right salesperson and or field application engineer. And we'll go from there. I want to thank the team, Tracy, Youngrock, Andrew, and even Tasha as well for managing slides and getting that stuff put together for us. We really do appreciate it. And we're all looking forward to working with the GS3 in some more depth and experiencing the power that it has. So if there aren't any more questions, we're going to close it out and thank everybody else for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.